This is the main news from Korea. President Yoon received a real-time situation report at home and checked the damage caused by the heavy rain as the area around his home was flooded. According to the presidential office on the 9th, President Yoon called the Prime Minister, the Minister of Public Administration and Security, and the Mayor of Seoul alternately from the evening of the previous day to the dawn of the same day, and received a real-time report on the rain damage and urged them to do everything possible to prevent further damage. Initially, President Yoon ordered the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters in Gwangae-Wamon the day before and the security team to check the movement to go to the flood site. However, he is said to have received reports that he could not go because the road around his home was blocked. He also considered moving by helicopter, but he said he gave up because it could cause inconvenience to residents in the middle of the night. Around 100 millimeters of rain per hour around Acro Vista, Yoon's home, there was a series of heavy rain damage. An accident occurred when a manhole in Sokhodong was opened and a passerby fell into the manhole and was rescued. It is reported that President Yoon held the phone until dawn at his home and ordered countermeasures. As his brother-in-law, Acro Vista, was isolated, this place became the disaster headquarters situation room. President Yoon said, "It is expected that heavy rain will continue and it will take time to restore public transportation facilities due to flooding. Actively encourage them to adjust their working hours." In addition, relevant agencies such as local governments, the Korea Forest Service, and the fire department should thoroughly manage the heavy rain situation centering on the severe case, and take special measures such as evacuation of residents from dangerous areas in advance to prevent loss of life due to the loss of steep slopes and urgently ordered. He emphasized that the government has no intention of excluding China in relation to Chip 4, a semiconductor supply chain consultative body led by the U.S. It is interpreted as an intention not to touch the heart of China in a situation where Taiwan is mentioned as a Chip 4 participating country in addition to Korea, the United States, and Japan. In a question-and-answer session on the way to work on the 8th, President Yoon said, "Even if you don't worry too much about whether to participate in Chip 4, we will carefully watch and discuss with the relevant ministries to protect our national interest." Currently, the government has announced to the U.S. its intention to participate in the Chip 4 preliminary meeting. The specific agenda and level of participation are expected to be adjusted at a preliminary meeting to be held early next month. The meeting schedule or location has not yet been confirmed. Considering that the United States is an ally and the world's most advanced country in semiconductor design, the prospect of South Korea joining Chip 4 weighs on weight. It is observed that it is not easy to reject the request for cooperation from the United States to secure the semiconductor supergap technology. However, some point out that there is concern that this process could lead to backlash from the Chinese side. The general analysis is that Chip 4 started with the U.S. plan to contain China, which is competing for global technological supremacy, by strengthening semiconductor cooperation between Korea, the U.S., Japan, and Taiwan. The Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy also held a press conference at the government complex in Sejong on the same day and said, "Chip 4 participation is a matter to be decided in consideration of the national interest in pure economic and strategic dimensions, and there is no intention of excluding any country or forming a closed meeting. We plan to present our own opinions on the desirable direction at the preliminary meeting." The Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy said, "I think that Chip 4 is for the semiconductor industry and is purely an economic issue. Regarding the possibility of China's economic and diplomatic retaliation for its participation in Chip 4, he said, "It is difficult to say in detail, but I think the possibility of China's retaliation will vary depending on the content, level, and method of Chip 4. I intend to present my own opinion." Regarding the question that Japan's export restrictions could become an obstacle to participating in Chip 4, Minister Lee said, "It seems that the Chip 4 mechanism does not presuppose the resolution of bilateral export restrictions with Japan. We hope that the problem will be resolved naturally in the process of improvement." President Yoon, who returned from vacation on the 8th, began to renew his human resources. The first target of the renewal was Park Sun-ae, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Education. This is because Deputy Prime Minister Park abruptly announced and withdrawn her recent 5-year-old admission and abolition of foreign language high schools, causing public confusion and plunging support for the state government. There is a chilling public sentiment behind President Yoon's personal renewal card as soon as he returns from vacation. During his vacation, President Yoon's approval rating for his state administration fell further, dropping to 24%. President Yoon's current situation is that even those in their 60s, who had been announced, are turning their backs on him, and even the conservative supporters are on the verge of collapsing. In response, President Yoon corrected the personnel issue that had been pointed out the most since his inauguration. Whether or not the impact of the Yoon Suk-yeol administration's first ministerial change, triggered by Deputy Prime Minister Park, will lead to a human renewal of the presidential staff, has also emerged as a major issue in the future. In accordance with President Yoon's intention to renew the personnel, it is expected that a major staff reorganization will be carried out at the end of this month in some political circles and in the presidential office. There are a lot of big pending issues, such as the Liberation Day event and the 100th day of inauguration on the 17th, to replace the staff immediately. Above all, it is necessary to find personnel to replace the existing staff. Personnel is the biggest cause of the decline in approval ratings. As President Yoon said, the new staff can turn back public opinion only by incorporating the people's point of view. China's state-run Global Times reported on the 8th that China's People's Liberation Army, PLA, has extended its military exercises in the form of siege of Taiwan longer than originally scheduled. The training, which was originally scheduled to end at noon on the 7th, continued until the 8th. The Global Times reported that the Chinese military's drills showed China's unrivaled regional deterrence, and carried a domestic expert's view that the exercises would not stop until unification. Chinese military expert Song Zhongping told the media, until the Taiwan issue is resolved, these exercises will not stop. The longer Taiwan is in lockdown, the more it will show its control over the mainland, he said. The media reported that after U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, China is showing its will for reunification, realizing that its sovereignty and territory have been violated. The Eastern Front of the Chinese Army, which has Taiwan as its operational zone, issued a statement on the 8th and said it had continued anti-submarine training and assault operations in the waters and airspace surrounding Taiwan. China's state-run China Central News Agency reported that during the exercise, the Changchun, a guided missile-loading destroyer operating in the waters southwest of Taiwan, cooperated with several anti-submarine fighters to form an anti-submarine combat squadron including ship-based anti-submarine helicopters. Analysts interpreted that the Chinese military appears to have practiced taking control of the sea through anti-submarine exercises during the extended training period. The Taiwanese military is using old-fashioned submarines, but if the Chinese military launches an operation for unification, it will be necessary to neutralize the Taiwanese submarines, a military expert, who requested anonymity, told the Global Times. The expert referred to the United States and Japan as external military interference forces and explained, in particular, the United States has more nuclear-powered submarines, so it is very meaningful to conduct anti-submarine training in real underwater terrain around the island of Taiwan. Zhang Junqiu, a senior researcher at the Naval Military Research Institute of the People's Liberation Army of China, told the Global Times that the Chinese military had sent an aircraft carrier combat group, including at least one nuclear-powered submarine, to the exercise. Meanwhile, China's Fujian Provincial Maritime Bureau did not announce the establishment of a restricted access area for training on the 8th, unlike the last 4 to 7 days. Experts believe that the reason why the new zone has not been determined is most likely because there is no live ammunition that interferes with normal civilian activities. Song Zhongping said, even the United States does not set up restricted areas when conducting military activities if there is no effect on other ships or aircraft. Can be set, he added. B, a former 5th-grade employee of the General Affairs Department of the Gyeonggi Provincial Office, who was pointed out as a key figure in the alleged misappropriation of corporate cards by Kim Hye-kyung, wife of Democratic Party lawmaker Lee Jae-myung, is attracting attention as it is known that he owns 8 billion won of real estate. According to certified copies of the real estate register, it was revealed that Bae's real estate was a 3-story house in Yeongtong-gu, Suwon, Gyeonggi-do, jointly owned by his mother, and 2 apartments in Songbuk-gu and Songpa-gu, Seoul. According to the real transaction price disclosure system of the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, the real estate asset value is about 5 billion won, but the real estate values sold in the market are much higher, according to local real estate agents. Commercial houses in Yeongtong-gu, Suwon are traded for at least 3.5 billion won, and the current sale price of apartments in Songpa-gu and Songbuk-gu is 2.4 billion won and 1 billion won, respectively. The 3 cases alone are worth more than 6.9 billion won. In addition, the apartment in Bundang-gu, Songnam-si, Gyeonggi-do, in the name of her husband, whom B is known to have stayed in until recently, is said to be sold for 800 million to 900 million won. This fact drew attention again when it was revealed that B was the owner of the building in which Kim, a reference who made an extreme choice on the 26th of last month, while receiving a police investigation related to the suggestion of misuse of corporate cards. Coincidentally, Bae's full-fledged fortune formation coincides with the inauguration of Songnam Mayor, a political leap forward for former presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung. B bought the Jamsil apartment for 950 million won in July 2010, when Rep. Lee Jae-myung took office as mayor of Songnam. In September 2010, 2 months after Rep. Jae-myung Lee took office as Songnam mayor, B joined Songnam City Hall as a contract position in charge of foreign guests, which is a level 9 civil servant in Gyeonggi-do. 2 years and 6 months later, in March 2013, he bought land in Yeongtong, Suwon, and built a house there the following year. It is pointed out that it is virtually impossible for B, who has been a contract employee for the past 12 years, to accumulate close to 8 billion won in property, so the process should be thoroughly reviewed. A member of the People's Power of Gyeonggi Province said, "The problem is that Mr. B started earning money from the time he entered public office as Mayor Lee Jae-myung's secretary. It is reasonable doubt to have doubts." Regarding B, who has been accused of leading the blockade of corporate cards in connection with the alleged misappropriation of corporate cards by Kim Hye-kyung, the wife of Jae Myung Lee, additional suspicions such as involvement in the process of renting the house next door to Jae Myung Lee to the Gyeonggi Housing and Urban Corporation as a dormitory has been raised. One of the suspicions is that B intervened in the process of Kim Hye-kyung, the wife of Jae Myung Lee, who died during the presidential election last year. Earlier, in December of last year and in February of last year, the People's Power accused B, along with Kim Hye-kyung, on charges of abuse of power and loss of the state treasury. The police called B on the 3rd and conducted an investigation into the circumstances of the corporate card payment and whether there was an instruction from the superior. The FBI has reportedly raided and searched the home of former U.S. President Donald Trump. According to Bloomberg and other foreign media on the 8th, former President Trump issued a statement saying, "My resort home in Palm Beach, Florida, is besieged, raided and occupied by FBI agents. The search was unannounced," he added. "They even broke my safe." He also said that this has never happened to any U.S. president and that it is unnecessary and inappropriate. Trump has pointed out that he is an attack on radical left-wing Democrats who do not want to run for president in 2000. The FBI has yet to comment on the search and seizure. The U.S. is pushing for a plan to exclude China from the global supply chain, from semiconductors to batteries. The U.S. has decided to provide subsidies for electric vehicles of up to $7,500 per electric vehicle only when it procures battery materials and parts from countries other than China starting in 2000. This means that China will build its own supply chain by breaking away from the battery supply chain, which has dominated 70 to 80% of China. Not only global automakers, but also battery and materials companies are in crisis. The U.S. electric vehicle market is expected to grow explosively as the possibility of passing the Inflation Reduction Bill promoted by the U.S. administration Joe Biden increases. However, the bill included a clause that only applies to EVs that are eligible for tax credit if they were manufactured in the United States. According to industry sources on the 8th, a bill to reduce inflation promoted by the Joe Biden administration passed the U.S. Senate and was handed over to the House of Representatives. The bill will be voted on in the House of Representatives on the 12th, and it is highly likely to pass, as the House is controlled by the Democratic Party of which President Biden belongs. According to the bill, the U.S. government will provide a $7,500 tax credit to consumers who purchase new electric vehicles and $4,000 to low-income and middle-class people who buy used electric vehicles, respectively. The U.S. plans to increase the proportion of electric vehicles in the U.S. to 50% by the year 2000 by providing huge subsidies. As a result, demand for electric vehicles in the United States is expected to explode, in which case the United States could overtake China to become the world's largest electric vehicle market. However, the bill included a clause that would apply only to EVs that are eligible for tax credit if they were manufactured in the U.S., so the lights of automakers including Hyundai Motor Company and Kia Motors fell. In the case of Hyundai Motor Company and Kia Motors, their representative electric vehicles, the Ioniq 5 and EV6, are all produced in Korea and exported to the United States. If Hyundai Motors and others do not increase local production in the U.S. after the bill is passed, there is no expectation of benefit at all. On the other hand, domestic battery makers such as LG Energy Solution, SK Ion, and Samsung SDI are expected to benefit from the bill. Battery Samsa has built or is already operating a joint venture with automakers such as GM, Ford, and Stellantis in a standalone plant. On the other hand, Chinese battery makers, the largest competitor, have not yet established production bases in North America, and the prospect that it will not be easy in the future due to the US-China conflict is waiting. The government will sell idle and underutilized state-owned assets worth more than 16 trillion won over the next 5 years. At the same time, the plan is to relieve the government's financial burden by encouraging private participation in the development of state land. Relevant ministries, including the Ministry of Strategy and Finance, held a meeting of emergency economy ministers on the 8th and announced a plan to revitalize the sale and utilization of idle land and underutilized state-owned property. The government said, it is necessary for the public sector to take the lead and promote intensive innovation such as expenditure restructuring said. Currently, out of about 701 trillion won of state-owned assets such as land and buildings, 41 trillion won is for general property that is not used for administrative purposes and can be disposed of, such as for sale. In the meantime, the government has been generating about 2 trillion won in fiscal revenue per year by selling these general properties. To this end, from next month, the government will conduct a full-scale survey on the utilization status of all administrative assets. It also increases the participation of the private sector in the development of state land. In the case of large-scale idle land, development is to be led by the private sector, even if it cannot be sold to the private sector. In addition, for the mixed state and public land, the joint development project between the state and local governments will be promoted. The government plans to develop public buildings within the project site through a consignment/fund development method, and use the remaining part through private participation or loan/sale. In the case of non-urban state land that is difficult to sell due to its low business potential, the state and local governments will take the initiative to develop it. The government said, based on a full investigation to be conducted from next month, we will start selling idle and underutilized state land from next year. Following the announcement of the strategy for achieving a semiconductor superpower last month, the National Advanced Strategic Industry Special Act came into effect this month, but it is far from insufficient compared to other countries armed with direct subsidies and exceptional tax benefits. A sense of crisis is spreading that if substantial deregulation measures such as speeding up the licensing process for semiconductor industrial complex development are not accompanied, Korea may lag behind its semiconductor competitors, which receive unprecedented subsidies from the government and operate new factories one after another from 2024 to 2025. According to the Korea Institute for Industrial Economics and Trade and the Semiconductor Industry on the 9th, the Semiconductor Support Act passed by the United States last month provides direct subsidies of $39 billion to the construction of semiconductor manufacturing facilities for 5 years until the year 2000, and the National Semiconductor Technology Center, advanced semiconductor R&D programs such as advanced back-end production programs, etc. It includes a total investment of 52 billion won and 68 trillion won, including an investment of $11 billion. The funds required for the implementation of the Semiconductor Support Act are planned to be implemented by creating a total of 4 funds in cooperation with the Ministry of Commerce, the Ministry of Commerce, the Ministry of National Defense, and the State Department. Separately, it was decided to apply a 25% tax credit to investment in semiconductor facilities and equipment through the Semiconductor Promotion Act. The tax credit is worth $24 billion over 10 years and can be paid in advance. On the other hand, the South Korean government's strategy to achieve a semiconductor superpower is focused on supporting infrastructure and regulatory improvements so that semiconductor companies can invest more than 340 trillion won by the year 2000, rather than direct large-scale subsidies to companies like the United States. For example, the strategy is to support companies to maximize efficiency by raising the maximum allowable capacity for new facility expansions in limited sites by deregulation, e.g. raising the semiconductor floor area ratio up to 1.4 times from 350% to 490%. It also includes tax support benefits such as a 2 percentage point increase in Indiana the tax credit rate for large corporations' semiconductor facility investment from 6 to 10% from 8 to 12%, but the deduction rate is still insufficient compared to the 25% in the United States. Belatedly, the ruling party, People's Power, extended the period of tax credit for facility investment in high-tech strategic industries such as semiconductors to 2,300 years, and the tax credit for large corporations increased from 6% to 20%, from 8% to 25% for medium-sized enterprises, and from 8% to 25% for small and medium-sized enterprises. The Semiconductor Industry Competitiveness Enhancement Law was proposed, which expanded from 10% to 30% to balance the tax benefits of competing countries. However, it is not easy to pass castration due to the political controversy surrounding tax reduction. There are even concerns that semiconductor companies may choose the US as their top priority production base. If there are many direct government subsidies or tax benefits to build or expand new semiconductor production facilities in an atmosphere where the cost burden of equipment investment is increasing due to interest rate hikes and inflation, there is no reason to choose Korea, which has high regulatory barriers. In fact, the government-level support measures that other Asian countries other than Korea are offering to secure the lead in the semiconductor competition are unconventional. In order to actively support semiconductor companies, the Japanese government urgently organized a large-scale subsidy of 774 billion yen and 7.4 trillion won through the supplementary budget last year. They are taking good care of foreign companies that invest in their country, such as providing 100 million won. Taiwan has operated about 150 government-supported semiconductor production-related projects over the past decade, and is applying a 15% tax credit to semiconductor R&D. With the goal of raising the semiconductor self-sufficiency rate from 10 to 30% to 70% by 2005, China exempts high-tech semiconductor companies from corporate tax for 10 years. The $1 exchange rate is expected to show a limited decline in the 1,301 range, waiting for the July CPI announcement on the 10th. The global dollar index is showing limited movement at the 106 line. According to the Seoul Foreign Exchange Brokerage on the 9th, the 1-month $1/dollar contract traded in the New York Difference Settlement Futures Market last night was priced at 1,300.51. Considering the recent 1-month swap points, the exchange rate is expected to start lower by 3 won from the previous trading day's closing price of 1,306.41. On this day, the exchange rate will try to break below 1,301 in line with the decline in the offshore exchange rate, but there is a possibility that the fall may be reduced as it faces up and down pressure at the same time. The global dollar index is maintaining the 606th mark ahead of the release of the US price index. On the afternoon of the 8th local time, the dollar index showed a 163-fold decrease in points compared to the previous day. The Chinese yuan is showing a steady movement at 6.76 yuan per dollar. Although the yuan is under strong pressure on positive economic indicators such as China's July exports of $101 billion and 131 trillion won, up 18% from the same period of the previous year, the situation, such as the confrontation with Taiwan, can be interpreted as a bearish material. Global risk appetite is sluggish as the New York stock market continued to be mixed last night. It remains to be seen whether the domestic stock market will continue to be mixed. The day before, foreign investors net bought 170 billion won and individuals also bought the Kospi index, up 0.09%. On the other hand, the Kodak index closed down 0.09% as foreign investors sold 45 billion won. If the net buying flow of foreign investors continues in the Kospi market, it could be a factor supporting the strong won pressure. In terms of supply and demand, both up and down pressures can come out at the same time. Payment demand from importers in the early 1,300 won range will support the lower end, but if sentiment is waning due to the strong won betting, the exchange rate is expected to fluctuate from the late 1,291 to the early 1,301 range. Xinyan Investment believes that the default of a real estate developer in the Chinese real estate market may act as noise in the financial market, but it is controllable. Xinyan Investment researcher said on the 9th, according to the regulation of real estate developers under the principle of commonwealth, there is a money crunch and defaults have caused construction to be stopped. According to CRIC, a real estate research institute, as of July, 235 apartment complexes in 82 cities were refusing to repay their mortgages. The root cause of this situation is the regulation of real estate in accordance with the Chinese Communist Party's policy of shared wealth for all to live well together. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, applied the 3 red lines and imposed strict lending restrictions on ineligible developers. As a result, a financial tightness problem arose, and 24 of the top 200 developers so far declared defaults. The contract sales of default companies in 2021 are 3.14 trillion yuan and 600 trillion won, and assuming 70% of the LTV, the size of the mortgage loan will reach 2.2 trillion yuan and 420 trillion won. Xinyan Investment researcher said, more than 90% of the Chinese housing market is pre-sale, and it usually takes 2 to 2.5 years to complete. The size of the mortgage loan will be larger, he said. Standard & Poor's Global Ratings estimated that 6.4% of total mortgage loans, or 2.49 trillion yuan, and Deutsche Bank, 7%, or 2.72 trillion yuan, were exposed to risk. The researcher said, if we assume that the amount of mortgage loans currently exposed to risk is 2.5 trillion yuan, this is 6.43% of the total mortgage loans and 1.21% of the total RMB loans. It will not, he predicted. The Chinese authorities do not appear to be giving up. At the Politburo meeting at the end of July, he mentioned guaranteed housing delivery for the first time and promised to stabilize the real estate market by mobilizing all policy tools. According to the Financial Times, the authorities are known to be pursuing a 1 trillion yuan bailout plan to support developer liquidity. In order for the Chinese real estate market to stabilize, he believed that the real estate market recovery should come first. This downward cycle, which started in September last year due to developer regulations, has already been going on for 11 months. However, it is analyzed that the will of the authorities to stabilize the real estate market is clear. In the month of July alone, about 70 real estate stimulus packages were announced in Indiana's 62 cities. These are things that can stimulate real demand, such as lowering mortgage interest rates, expanding LTV, and easing home purchase requirements. If construction resumes and housing delivery is guaranteed as promised by the Chinese authorities, private investment sentiment can fully turn around, the researcher said. He added, as real estate is a key variable in the Chinese economy in the second half of the year, the Chinese authorities will do their best to solve the real estate problem because the Chinese Communist Party Congress is scheduled to be held in October, which will determine Xi Jinping's third consecutive term. On the 9th, the number of new COVID-19 cases is expected to record around 150,000. This is the level of this week's peak of 150,000 predicted by the government. The government and the medical community initially predicted that the number of confirmed cases would increase this week after the peak summer vacation season, when travel volume increases. The key is whether the epidemic situation will flow to the observatory as the increase in the number of confirmed cases has stopped at the level of 150,000 this week. According to the quarantine authorities and local governments such as Seoul on the 9th, a total of 143,605 new confirmed cases nationwide from midnight to 9 p.m. the previous day were counted. This is an increase of 91,128 from 53,477 at the same time the day before. The number increased by 36,868 from 106,737 on the 1st, a week ago. Based on the same time period, it is the highest number in 4 months since 19,380 people on April 12. By 17 local governments, the metropolitan area accounted for 76,037 people, accounting for 52.9% of the total, including 29,490 in Seoul, 38,839 in Gyeonggi, and 7,708 in Incheon. Record-breaking downpours of up to 400 mm fell in the metropolitan area, causing 7 deaths and 6 missing in Seoul and Gyeonggi areas. There have also been cases of disappearances in which citizens are swept away by sudden surges of water. In Sokkogu, Seoul, 4 people were swept away by the water near the underground shopping street, restaurants, and sewers. In Gwangju, Gyeonggi-do, 2 people went missing due to swept away by torrents caused by river flooding. Firefighters were busy trying to save lives from the continuing accident. 88 people were rescued by ambulances dispatched to the river due to the torrent, and more than 300 reports of removal of obstacles such as roadside trees continued. In particular, among public facilities, flooding occurred in the lines between Guro Station on the Gyeongin Line and Incheon and Byeongjam stations, between Cheongdong Station on Line 4 and Seoul Station Gyeonggangu Office Station on the Gyeongbu Line, Sindabang Station on Line 2, Isu Station on the Chilo Line, Dongjak Station on the Guho Line, and Sohun Station on the Silim Line. As houses were submerged in water, more than 100 households and about 160 people were displaced in Seoul and Incheon and Gyeonggi Province, and they are staying in nearby schools, gymnasiums, and bed and breakfast facilities. In addition, the number of people who temporarily evacuated to prevent damage reached 300 people from 160 households. Heavy rain warnings are currently in effect for the Seoul metropolitan area, Gangwon inland, mountainous areas, and the northern coast of South Chungcheong Province. So far, the accumulated precipitation in major regions has recorded 417 mm in Dongjak, Seoul, 380 mm in Sokko and Gangnam, 370 mm in Yangpyeong and Gyeonggi, 362 mm in Gwangju and Gyeonggi, and 269 mm in Bupyeong and Incheon. Due to heavy rains in the Seoul area, some sections including Dongjak Station on the Seoul Subway Guho Line were inundated on the morning of the 9th, and some sections of operation were suspended for facility inspection and restoration. The express train service has also been completely suspended, which is expected to cause inconvenience on the way to work. The area where the service will be suspended is a total of 7 station sections between Nodul Station and Sapyeong Station on the Guho Line. As the two-way operation of the subway in the section was suspended, the Guho Line will be operated separately from Gaewa Station to Noryangjin Station and from Sinanhyeon Station to Central Veterans Hospital Station. Noryangjin Station and Sinanhyeon Station were suspended due to flooding at Dongjak Station and Gubanpo Station. All sections of Line No. 1 to Line No. PAL, Ui Sinseal Line, and Silim Line operated by Seoul Transportation Corporation are operating normally from the first train. As soon as the heavy rain warning was issued the day before, the Disaster Safety Countermeasures headquarters were activated and the emergency system was put into operation. From the concept of a vegetarian man who is passive in love and marriage, the concept of an indifferent fast-eating man is spreading beyond Japan to Korea. About 7 out of 10 men in their 20s in Japan do not have a spouse or lover. According to the White Paper on Gender Equality published by the Cabinet Office recently, 39.8% of Japanese men in their 20s answered that they had no experience in dating. 70% of men in their 20s answered that they do not currently have a spouse or date. Also, 34.1% of men in their 30s had no dating experience. On the other hand, 25.1% of women in their 20s and 21.5% in their 30s had no dating experience. When 4 out of 10 people in their 20s answered that they had no experience in dating, the government is concerned about the phenomenon of single marriage, late marriage, and low birth rate. Seiko Noda, Minister of Countermeasures for Low Fertility, explained, the lack of a spouse and a lover must have had a significant effect not only on income but also on the fact that there was no meeting. It is analyzed that income is a stumbling block. According to the report, among male respondents from single-person households, 30% were men with an annual income of 3 million yen or less, about 28.7 million yen. On the other hand, women accounted for more than half of single-person households. The Japanese authorities said, it is necessary to review systems and policies in a wide range of fields so as not to fall into economic difficulties. Korean men expressed their sympathy for the news from Japan. He expressed an opinion that it is understandable to give up dating for reasons such as lack of financial means, lack of a suitable ideal type, or because it is bothersome to focus on studies. Netizens commented, economic conditions are favorable, but considering the social dislike of taking responsibility, I feel comfortable being alone, I don't have to suffer because of love or marriage, I'm worried that Korean men will become fast eaters like Japan, etc. commented on. A new zoonotic virus has been discovered in China. Chinese media Pengpai reported on the 8th that cases of infection with a new animal-derived virus that can be transmitted to humans have emerged in recent years in Shandong and Henan provinces in China. According to Pengpai, Professor Liu Wei and Fang Lishuan of the Institute of Microbial Epidemiology of the Chinese Academy of Military Sciences, and Professor Wang Linpa of the National University of Singapore Medical School, jointly researched and published this paper in the New England Journal of Medicine, a medical journal. They said that a new Henipavirus was discovered in the paper. Since it was first discovered in December of the 8th year of 2000 in Shandong and Henan provinces, until August of last year, a total of 35 people had been infected, Feng Pai said, citing this paper. When infected with this new henipavirus, which the researchers named Rangea henipavirus, it is said that symptoms such as fever, lethargy, cough, anorexia, muscle pain, and nausea occur. Professor Wang Linpa said, so far, the cases of infection have not been fatal or very serious. Thank you for watching today. Please like and subscribe.